This is the Chris Stigall Show podcast.
Okay, guys, let's just rip. And Chris Stigall.
Chris Stigall. Chris, thanks for being with me tonight.
Chris Stigall.
I'm joined now by Chris Stigall.
Now, he puts the broad in broadband. It's Chris Stigall.
The Chris Stigall podcast is presented by usmedicalplan.com. Save big money monthly and get better health coverage at usmedicalplan.com.
Well, hey there, how you doing? Thanks a lot for downloading the Chris Stigall Show podcast. It means a ton to us that you leave 5-star reviews and written reviews, particularly if you're an Apple podcaster or a Spotify podcaster. You have the ability to do it on both venues in particular. So if you don't know where that is on Apple Podcasts, you scroll all the way down to the bottom of the menu of shows, and that's where you can write a review, which is awesome. If you could take the time to do it, I'd owe you one. Or at least leave a 5-star review. That helps immeasurably because people, as you know, that are looking for podcasts and new podcasts, your reviews, you suggesting this show, passing it along, means more than anything I can do. So thanks for your help there in spreading the good word, and thanks for subscribing so you never miss an episode. I'm away on vacation for a little bit with the family, but I didn't want to leave you hanging. So number one, I'd ask you to check out the Harumph Society because I am going to have some new posts there while away. Might even put up a few pictures and some thoughts. If some news breaks, that's where you'll find me, at the Harumph Society, okay? Meanwhile, today's show and every show while I'm away through 4th of July. We'll be back with brand new shows on July 5th. But this day and every day through the 4th of July, I have a whole spate of interviews that are brand new to this podcast audience. If you only listen to me on the podcast, then all of this content that you're going to be left with is brand new to you. Now, what other host goes on vacation and still leaves you with fresh content? Fantastic interviews that I think you're going to love. So sit back, relax, and enjoy these podcasts while I'm sitting back and relaxing with a cigar somewhere on a beach, I hope, if all goes well, as I record this today. Let me tell you about the guy that makes this show possible each and every day. A guy that I hope when you're listening, if you're thinking about trying to save money somewhere, who isn't these days, one of the most obvious places to cut is your health insurance. No, I don't mean get rid of your health insurance. I mean cut costs. I mean, have you shopped? Have you compared what John Ruhlman at usmedicalplan.com could do for you? John and his team have a network of 80 private health insurers all across the country. Give him a call and tell him if you buy health insurance for you, your business, people that you employ, if you are a self-insurer, single person, if you insure your family, you buy your own health insurance for kids and spouse, if you're a senior on a fixed income and you buy a supplemental plan for Medicare, all of those scenarios, John Ruhlman knows there are private sector health insurance plans out there that are way cheaper than the one you're using, I'll bet you, and can give you even better coverage. I personally have a friend that saved $2,000. I've had listeners that have written me and said, Chris, I saved a few hundred. One guy said I saved $1,000. I mean, a few hundred to $1,000 to maybe $2,000 a month for better coverage. And yes, it's always better. John's never going to leave you in a lurch where like you're with substandard care, all right? He's John Ruhlman. He's at usmedicalplan.com. I recorded a full conversation with him at chrisstigall.com so you can get a sense of who he is before you reach out if you'd like. But do give him a call. Tell him what kind of plan you have. Maybe Obamacare is the better way to go. He'll tell you that too. He wants to save you money just as much as I want you saving money, but always with good care, good coverage. All right, so 877-410-4321 or usmedicalplan.com. We've spent a lot of time over the last couple of weeks picking up on what I believe is a trend. I'm noticing it more and more. We certainly saw it, all of us saw it, during the leak of the Dobbs decision last year, but I noticed it more recently when we saw the character attacks on Clarence Thomas, suggesting that he was taking bribes or gifts or that he was somehow compromised. And I warned when I first heard it, they were going to start calling for impeachment of justices. And sure enough, you're starting to hear some Democrats suggesting it. All of this tells me that there is one branch of government left between us and the jackals of the progressive left, and that is the judiciary, specifically the Supreme Court. And I think they are targeting these people to try to take them down, maybe one by one. Hadley Arkes is a legal scholar and author of a brand new book called Mere Natural Law, Originalism and the Anchoring Truths of the Constitution. Now, his book is far smarter and much bigger in thought than what I just said, but Mr. Arkes, welcome to the show, first of all.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Chris.
As I say, you have much more to say about much more in-depth matters than just that. But if I could, on the surface, ask you, do you agree with my assessment they're out to take down the court?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if Clarence Thomas were accused of having library books overdue, you'd be getting. It doesn't matter what it is. The other members of the court, liberal members, have failed to have neglected or overlooked filing affidavit returns to show the reception of gifts. Look, what's going on? It's not the court that's going to protect us. It's actually you need the Congress.
Yes.
And the executive. You're going to need the Congress in order to protect these people. This is not going to stop unless you stop this drumbeat in the Senate for this contriving these phony charges to use again. Anything will work. And the curious thing is, it's a sober thing that I realize. I have three friends on the court, and you realize that they're really constrained in their personal lives now. Sam Alito says that when he goes fishing, he has to have marshals in a nearby boat. You see what we're facing is an opposition that works with intimidation, charging into restaurants, attacking people in their homes. This is something new in my own lifetime, and it's what's so destructive and scary about what's been going on of late. At the same time, the curious thing is, why people assume that if you have a crowd, a menacing crowd outside a home of a justice, that it's all right as long as they're not throwing something. The crowd is menacing. You know body language. Yes. A truck driver knows the difference between the crowd that welcomes the Red Sox back after they won the World Series and a menacing crowd. You know the body language. You know what they're there for. And strictly speaking, in the law, assault has never required bodily touching. You could shoot at somebody, deliberately miss. You could take an unloaded gun, and click it to somebody's head. The threatening phone calls in the middle of the night. These are assaults, and the assaults can be sometimes read in body language. The expression goes in that way. The burning cross outside a home, or the crowd that stands all night outside the home of the first black family that moves into the neighborhood. Even though they're silent, there's something menacing about them. We could read these. Now, to think that grown-ups, that the Attorney General could say he's leaving that decision on protecting the judges to the marshals. No, he is in charge of the marshal's office. And then you see the guidelines coming down from the Department of Justice. So it's all right as long as they're not showing any violent tendency. No, it is not all right. These are gross acts of intimidation. Even the late Justice Hugo Black, who was an absolutist on speech, he did not think that it was legitimate to have a mob outside a courthouse, lest the impression be fostered that anything going on in that courthouse is going to be affected by amassing that mob in the street. Is an act of intimidation. And that's what's going on now. You've caught that. In fact, Justice Alito, Mr. Arkes, said in an interview last weekend. Yes, I saw that. That he believes the leak. He thinks he knows who did it, but he laughed, and I do too, because it's just such a preposterous notion that somehow the assertion that it was a leak done by the majority of the court or someone with affiliation with the majority to somehow galvanize support. I don't even, there's no logic in that. If anything, leaking that was to intimidate. It should have been evident. To take a complicated three-corner shot to put that, to attribute that to somebody who's that clever and or unclever, thinking that it wouldn't boomerang. It was obvious. That was obvious the case. And look at the enduring effect. Thuggery works. Yes. These people now this to stop this, you need some kind of political movement, a movement showing itself in Congress and showing itself in the executive. First of all, you need Michael McCasey. Judge McCasey was Attorney General. Was just just aghast at Merrick Garland's decision that he said, saying that he couldn't. That this was a decision of the marshal. No, you're the Lieutenant General. They are under you.
Yes.
It first and half matters. It hopes to have an executive that takes seriously the. No, I think we've got here is I don't know much about the. I have a lot of younger people getting caught up on the philosophy of Carl Schmitt, the German philosopher who was read by the Nazis, but he's taken seriously now in some people doing political theory. It reduces things to friends and enemies. The other side now counts the conservatives as the enemies.
Yes.
So anything goes.
Yeah, and including amongst their own side. I mean, if anybody on their own side even so much as bucks them on any one issue, they're enemies. I mean, in fact, their new motto is silence is violence, Mr. Arkes. That's their new motto. Just being quiet and not taking a position is an affront to the left now.
Well, that's like Lincoln's old argument about the slaveholders. You must be avowedly with them. Yeah. If you're not avowedly with them, their silence is taken as opposition. As the argument used against Jack Phillips, the masterpiece baker in Colorado, he is holding back from refusing to bake a cake for a same-sex wedding. Well, there are other bakers who wait to. It doesn't matter that other bakers wait to do it.
Yeah.
By holding back from doing it, you're doing something wrong, and therefore you deserve to be punished.
Your book, Hadley Arkes, called Mere Natural Law, Originalism and Anchoring Truths of the Constitution. Natural law itself, I'd love for you to define it. I'll just tell you that in a nation that is increasingly an affront to a creator and God, I find it's easier to, in their minds, live in a world where natural law doesn't exist. So can we first define it and then recognize that it's probably pretty easy for the left to ignore since they don't really believe in a creator? So many of them.
President Nixon used to say, "Thanks for asking a question." But the people said the natural law is the law that underlies the law. It's the law that tells you why you have laws in any subject. For example, as Immanuel Kant would say, before you have the positive law, the law that is enacted, you need an underlying law to tell you why you'll be warranted in having a law. You see signs saying 65 miles an hour, 35 miles an hour. These are regulations. But behind those regulations is a deeper law that tells you why you'd be justified in restraining the freedom of people to drive at speeds that put life at hazard. But take it further back. These are what do we mean? We have this biped who conjugates verbs, and we think he's a bearer of rights. Okay, in the law, what does it mean to say somebody has right? You think you have standards to judge the difference between rights and wrongs. Where do those come from? Let me put it another way. You'll probably used to give people, just with some of our young lawyers we work with. Let's say you come to the judgment that it is wrong for a parent to torture a child. Do you respond to that by saying, we'll give him a tax incentive to induce him to stop? Offer him a DVD player? I think, no. Faced with that, it's a wrong. It elicits the command to stop. Well, why do you do that? For whom do you say it is wrong to torture a child? In a moral voice, you say, anyone, everyone. And therefore, the argument used to go, we would be justified in forbidding that torture. To whom? To anyone. Forbidding it then with the force of law. That is the original classic understanding between the logic of morals and the logic of law. Without that logic of morals, without that underlying natural law, there is no law. And the underlying natural law guides you every moment in your understanding of right and wrong.
Moral law must, the source for moral law, is there any other source than a biblical source, a creator?
Well, it makes a profound difference. Well, there's, the great Jacques Bellamy, read by the founder, say, well, some people say law emanates from a lawgiver. Others say, no, law arises from reason. And he said, well, we have more confidence that law arises from a lawgiver when we know that it's in accord with reason. And the jobs of natural law, the purpose of natural law, is to give you have access through reason to matters of right and wrong, even without invoking matters of faith. So they say the Catholic position on abortion, it says simply that you draw an embryology with principled reasoning and say, well, why is that offspring in the womb not a human being? Doesn't have arms, legs? Yeah, well, people lose arms and legs without losing their standing as to receive the protections of the law. Doesn't speak yet, either do deaf mutes. No, there was a line of Thomas Aquinas that we know the divine law through revelation, but the natural law we know through the reasoning that is accessible to human beings as human beings. What do you think of St. Paul in the Romans, when the Gentiles, who do by nature of the things of the law, they are unto a law in themselves. They have access through reason. Now, where do we get this? Where did we get creatures of reason? That emanates from something.
Yes.
And the oldest saying, it was from the Creator who endowed us with right. Now, I say people say in their defense of religion, they want to include the Satanists. Well, you go back to the Declaration of Independence, the author of the laws of nature, including the author of the moral law. There's no way in which the God of the Declaration could have a position of indifference to the affirmation of radical evil. To accept Satanism does not accord with the understanding of this of what we mean by God and God's will, and it doesn't really accord with the understanding of most culture what it is.
May I interrupt on that point and ask you, do you think someone who, because I know you get into the subject of originalism, and I remember the great late Justice Scalia tells that hilarious story. It's one of my favorite stories he used to tell, was when he came down on the side of, supporting or saying that there was a constitutional freedom to burn the flag, that his wife stridently disagreed, and, she would hum "You're a Grand Old Flag" as he came down to breakfast in the morning to kind of taunt him for what she felt was his wrong-headed decision. I could imagine that Justice Scalia would today say maybe the opposite of what you just said about Satanism. For instance, we just had a ruling in Pennsylvania that a satanic club could continue at a public school. And I heard people say, well, if you're going to talk about God and a creator in school, then you're going to have to make way for Satan and a Satan club too. I can imagine that an originalist might say that is true. Would you disagree?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
And originalists would have no doubt that what's Madison is saying. What is religion? Our duty to the Creator who created us, and to understanding of His laws. There's no way in which the God of the founding was a God encompassing moral relativism. And Scalia, Scalia is a close friend of mine. He wouldn't have made the argument that there must be these standards for judging. We cannot, any understanding of God, it must be a God whose orders are directed to a lawful end, to a sense of rightness. But Scalia probably would not move to that level. He probably moved to this level of saying, no, the way it's always been understood in this country is that this is the God of the Declaration is not a God who's open to Satanism. Now, of course, there's a problem then in the decisions of the courts on conscientious objection, where you started giving exemptions to people whose convictions stem from belief in a supreme being. Then you got away from that. It could just be a force of the universe. And then simply things that people read off the back of cereal boxes. And the courts would say, well, who knows, these things, these passions take a place in these people's lives comparable to the passions taken by religion. Well, by that point, you've really walked away from any coherent understanding of religion. You've detached religion from its moral framework and from a God who has a moral law. So, we used to say, if Moses came down from Mount Sinai, he said, look, God told me not to overly worry much about lying down with somebody else's wife. or taking what is not yours. I think the people around would have been scratching their heads and saying, "Are you sure? Are you sure you got that one right? Were you listening?"
Hadley, Arkes is with us. The book is Mere Natural Law, Originalism and the Anchoring Truths of the Constitution. So I would just ask, and I've often made this point, I quibble with secularists or atheists on this point all the time. It's an overly simple question, but I always ask, where does the Bill of Rights come from? Where do your rights come from? And if you say they're man-made, man-created, then why do you think you have a right to anything at all? Any man could take it away then. Where's the authority? Where's the ultimate authority? And if you rest it with man, then it can be taken, right? I mean, you've got to think of it that way.
Chris, that was the original argument against the Bill of Rights by the Federalists, who are concerned that people were being misinstructing people about the nature of their right. James Wilson, of whom my organization is named, great James Wilson, one of our premier minds among the founders, said, "We didn't bring forth this government for the sake of inventing new rights, but for the sake of securing and enlarging those rights we already had by nature." So one of the fears was that people would get up and say things like, "Those rights I have through the First Amendment." Oh, you think in the absence of that amendment, you wouldn't have a presumptive right in a free society to speak, to publish? So there were people wondering, what does it mean to say we attach this codicil saying, here are the rights we haven't given up against the government. We call them the Bill of Rights. Are you implying that you have in fact given up the bulk of your rights as a condition on entering under this government? So the question is, can I be subject to wage price control? Well, there's nothing that protects you in the Bill of Rights. So it must lie to the government to do things like that. Look, part of the pitch in the book is that the American founders did not get the source of their understanding of law from the Constitution or their moral understanding. They began with a moral understanding of the principles of right and wrong before they drafted the Constitution.
Yes.
They drew upon those principles.
If I may, that is why people like Barack Obama always spoke about it being a charter of negative liberties in a derisive way. It frustrates statists because they see that document as what it is. It's a statement of what the government cannot do to you, and that bothers people who like government control.
Yeah, but at the same time, they overthrow the deeper meanings of the thing. That is, let's say you didn't have the bill. You say, yeah, you don't have a right in the Bill of Rights to make a living making shoes or braiding hair. But the original understanding is you have that being we call a moral agent who can reason about rights and wrongs. He has a presumptive claim to all dimensions of his freedom, and that the burden lies with the government to justify restrictions. Well, that right of a woman to make living braiding hair, it's nothing. That's nothing trivial, because there's nothing trivial about the bearer of those rights. So my late friend Bob Bork when he was a judge, had a case in which he extended the reach of the First Amendment to cover the freedom of a sculptor in making sculpture. Well, it's very hard to attach that to the First Amendment. First Amendment was made about political speech. It's a stretch to cover sculpture, but it made perfect sense with the original understanding, the classic understanding of the law, that you have a presumptive claim to all dimensions of freedom. Making sculpture, yes. Shining shoes, yes. Making cars, yes. And the burden falls with the government to when you make a law, you are restricting somebody's freedom. You're removing their personal judgment. When you do something like that, it's the burden of the law to establish what is rightful and justified about this measure we're imposing on you that makes it rightful even for people who disagree with it. That's a serious moral burden of the law. And that's what the left resists that, because the left doesn't think they're moral truths. Barack Obama did not think all men are created equal was indeed an absolute truth. Madison and Lincoln thought it was. They thought it was an absolute truth that the right of human beings to govern themselves, that was anchored in the enduring nature that separates human beings from God and from animals. That no man was by nature the ruler of men, the way that God was by nature the ruler of men, and men were by nature the rulers of dogs and horses. Yes, that was so. As Jefferson said, anyone who denies that must think that the mass of mankind are born with saddles on their backs, and a privileged few are born with spurs on, ready to ride them. Barack Obama finds this does not quite understand what Lincoln and Madison understood.
This is why the Supreme Court agreeing to take up the issue of the power of these executive branch offices, departments, Labor Department, Energy Department. They're going to take that up this fall, and that's so critical because that's non-legislative, that's non-lawmaking. Those are just executive powers encroaching on our natural rights.
That's right. This is the delegation, putting these decisions in the hands of these administrations, making them in terms. What's the original understanding? It makes a profound difference. Look, people say they have a court. You have two litigants, right? The issue is confined to those two litigants. But if you have the measure in the legislative assembly, you have all kinds of interests. You see where this measure you're producing is running into conflict with many other interests. Mm-hmm. And so there's a real task there to see how you overcome those other interests or find what the policy is that can reconcile those interests. There's a different discipline dealing with a legislature than you have with making rules springing out of an administrative agency with a rather confined agenda and a set of concerns. Yes, it makes a profound difference to do these things in a legislative assembly with people reflecting the interests of many people out there, many different interests that people do care about.
Well, I am smarter for this conversation. You will be smarter for reading this brilliant book. The author of Mere Natural Law, Originalism and Anchoring the Truths of the Constitution, Hadley Arkes. I hope this is the first of many conversations we have, sir.
Oh, I love to come back. What's that Sam Goldwyn's line? I don't care if I make a nickel on this movie as long as every man, woman in the country sees it.
Thank you, Mr. Arkes.
Okay. Thanks, Chris.
It's been my pleasure and honor to talk about Bob Spinato at Williamsburg Dental in Broomall, just off the Blue Route, as my dentist and friend of over 12 years now. But now he has two brand new associates, his daughter Alexa and Dr. Geddes. Tell them about him, Bob.
Yeah, it's really a thrill for me to have both the dentists, my daughter and Dr. Jared Geddes. One of the things that I love about them both is when they don't have a patient in their chair, they're in my room watching what I do and trying to learn from me. And we hear enough about the new generation and they think they know everything and they don't want to work. And I've got two dentists who are really, really want to learn and really, really willing to learn, to work hard. And I enjoy learning from them. They brought some new skills and some new technologies to our office that will be great benefits to our patients. And so, if anything, I think that having them both there is going to expand and lengthen my career as opposed to shorten my career.
Pick up the phone or go online, make that appointment, 610-353-2700 or williamsburg-dental.com. Earlier, you might have heard me talking about this story at Fox News over the weekend. Trad wives, T-R-A-D wives, trad wives. That's short for traditional wives. Women who choose to stay home, care for their families and households are hardly unique to American society. Social media users appear fascinated with trad wives, short for traditional wives. The fascination has shown itself largely through negative commentary. Quote from Fox News Digital. Many have deemed this trend alarming, frightening, creepy, too good to be true alternative to life, a way to cheat your way out of hard work, a form of anti-worker activity similar to union busting and a white supremacy concept. Now, this is sort of a cousin story. It's really not specifically what Bethany Mandel and Karol Markowiz, who have both been guests of this show before, they've written this important new book. I hope everyone buys it. Just came out a couple of weeks ago, called Stolen Youth, How Radicals Are Erasing Innocence and Indoctrinating a Generation. Specifically, I know that Bethany is someone who homeschools her kids. And my point in this story was not so much about your book, ladies, and I welcome you both, first of all, but I would ask each of you, it seems as though this country is returning to, and whatever that means to you, a more traditional thing. I think true people of faith, Bible-based faiths are growing. I think you're seeing an influx of homeschooling, private education, and yes, traditional wives in the home. And is that a bad thing, ladies? I welcome you both. Bethany, I'll ask you to jump off with that first, I guess. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. So you'll hear my baby in the background. I'm really on brand this morning.
Perfect.
I mean, a lot of why we wrote Stolen Youth, it doesn't kind of feels like it's not connected, but it all is. There's a deep distrust and hatred and sort of resentment of anything traditional. And so a lot of what we wrote about in the book is this assault on childhood in ways that are not the opposite of traditional, extremely not age appropriate. And, this resentment of traditional values and family comes in a lot of different forms. And this hatred of trad wives is one of them. I wrote a piece for Deseret News a while ago about this trad wife phenomenon of hating on them. But, I mean, it's just sort of rewinding a couple decades to what we've always done. I mean, this is basic biology. I should put a sign outside my door that says, in this home we believe in science. Like, women take care of their young. Like, welcome to being a mammal. But I mean, this writing Stolen Youth was also, welcome to being a mammal. Like, we believe that women are women and men are men, and children shouldn't be exposed to graphic, sexually charged content, before they're ready for it.
Karol, I don't want to overstate this. I mean, men certainly have an important role in rearing children, but when it comes to protecting children, I think I have to give the edge to women who have risen up in huge ways when it comes to this public school sexualization thing, the critical race theory stuff. It's the women that have taken the lead on it, to be accurate, I think.
You're absolutely right, Chris. It has been the women that have taken the lead, and that's because, in the traditional sense, women are generally with the children more. So they've seen more. They know what's going on more. Look, men have been doing a phenomenal job also. There's so many men who are speaking up at school board meetings. I know Bethany and I both have good men in our lives who, are protecting of the children and do care and really do focus on what's going on in their kids' lives. But nowhere near the level that the women around have been able to focus on it. And that's not a bad thing. I don't think we need to upend all gender roles. And I don't think that we need to fall victim to the latest philosophy. I have this joke where there was a line in the famous show, Sex and the City, where the one normal couple, Charlotte and Harry, he says to her, "Can we not raise the children based on a book you haven't finished reading yet?" And that's been sort of what we've been doing in America. We've been raising the children based on some half-baked philosophy by some leftists and teachers' colleges from a book that they probably haven't finished reading yet.
How do you see boys and girls, Bethany? This is sort of a philosophical question, I guess. Boys and girls who have been raised with parents, at least a parent at home, raising them every day as you do, homeschooling. What are the differences or advantages, do you think? I mean, to people that may be considering this and haven't just taken that leap yet, but they kind of know it's tugging at them. Are there, if you want scientific study of the benefits, the differences, kids when they grow up, if you want to call it latchkey versus parents at home?
So, I mean, I think the ultimate sort of important thing is that parents are happy at the end of the day. And research indicates that, especially mothers are happy at the end of the day. And research indicates that most mothers prefer to work part-time or not at all in order to raise their kids. And I think that, I think back to my mother. She was amazing in so many ways and, loved her deeply, but she was not made to be a stay-at-home mom. And what was ultimately the best for her was the best for me. And so I'm kind of a big believer in mom comes first. And when mom is happy, everyone else is happy. Mm-hmm. But the research indicates that mom is usually happiest when she's working part-time or not at all, especially in the early years. I mean, I'm home with our 6 and we have a newborn, and I don't know how
6, by the way, you said, just for people that don't know. Sorry to interrupt, Bethany, but you said 6, right?
Yeah, 6. Yeah. And I don't know how I could possibly hold down a full-time job. As it is, I had 2 things on my to-do list today. You were one of them. And then we had to record a podcast later in the day. And I just texted and said, sorry, I have to bring my 1-year-old to the doctor because he woke up with his eye swollen shut. Oh. And every time that kind of thing happens, I think, like, I'm so glad I don't have to go into an office because I wouldn't be able to hold down a full-time job. It would be too stressful. So, I mean, ultimately, I think that, we have to just do what's right for moms in our families.
Karol, are you seeing that people are feeling I was just talking today culturally. They say that this Jesus Revolution film is this huge blockbuster that has done better for Lionsgate than any film since 2019. And just sort of my overarching theme is with this story on trad wives that Bethany and I were just talking about and films like these. I don't know. Maybe it's just hopeful and my imagination, but it feels like there is a cultural resurgence or revolution happening out there from how we're educating kids to what we believe in our spiritual lives and so on. Do you sense that?
I think so. I think it's a pendulum swing where we had gone so far in one direction that it's heading back the other way. People are hungry for normalcy. I moved to Florida a year ago. I always say we did it mostly to have a normal life for our kids that we didn't think we could have in New York City anymore. And so many people are making similar moves around the country. They're leaving these crazy leftist areas and going to just more saner, normal, places where they could raise their families and not worry about like the teacher, openly indoctrinating their kids. I'm not saying you shouldn't worry about it in red areas. And in fact, in the book, we cover that a lot, that this kind of thing, gender identity being taught in the classroom, CRT, so many different things is happening in red areas as well. But I would say it begins in the blue areas and trickles down to the red areas. And so if you're living in an insane place, you're probably living somewhere with a blue government in a blue ideological area.
The Assistant Secretary for Health, Dr. Admiral Rachel Levine, neither an admiral nor a Rachel, Bethany, had this to say late last week about gender-affirming care for America's youth.
I think that as we look to all the different elections in 2024, I think the next 2 years are going to be challenging, but I am positive and optimistic and hopeful that the wheel will turn after that, and that this issue won't be as politically and socially such a minefield. In the meantime, I can say that the children that you serve, and the young people that you serve, their families, and you all as their providers have supported the highest levels of the federal government. President Biden supports you, and he has articulated that support for the children and families frequently.
Yeah. Megyn Kelly tweeted, "Keep your scalpels away from our kids or we will sue you." Bethany, your reaction to the Assistant Secretary of Health?
Yeah, I mean, this is exactly why Stolen Youth is a bestseller. I think that parents realize that we are standing at a precipice and that our kids are on the line. And I am grateful on behalf of Levine's parents that person did not receive gender-affirming care, which is a euphemism. It's a euphemism for hormones that can permanently mar your body and surgical interventions. And I'm glad that Levine's children exist, and I'm glad that they were given the opportunity to exist. And I want children of this generation to have that same opportunity. What's really troubling is that Levine has said publicly that he is glad that he didn't transition into Rachel until later in life, because if he had done so, he would not have had children. And children are not capable of giving informed consent about the interventions that they're receiving now and how those will impact their bodies later on in adulthood. And Levine is right that in a couple years, the tide is going to turn in one way or another. And we've seen that with a lot of different social programs. But the difference is this is the first sort of social fad that can permanently mar and render children infertile and, permanently dependent upon medical intervention forever if they start on hormones or if they receive surgical intervention. And so, we are standing at a precipice, and this is why Stolen Youth is a bestseller, because there are a lot of parents who realize like their kids are on the line.
Bethany Mandel and Karol Markowiz co-authored Stolen Youth, How Radicals Are Erasing Innocence and Indoctrinating a Generation. Karol, as we just talked a minute ago, and as you just said, we do seem to be in the midst of a revolution. I wonder if it's on the education front. I believe this. My wife and I've talked with you both about this before. My wife and I do a podcast about moving to alternative forms of education, be that faith-based education or homeschooling or what have you. It seems to me that the surest way to save the country is to address what's going on in our public schools, and many states are starting to slowly embrace this idea of letting the tax money go with the student wherever they'd like to go. Is that the revolution that's required here ultimately to change the culture?
That's the start of the revolution. I'm very pro school choice. I love what Corey DeAngelis is doing. I think that this is the future. But the problem is it's not the present. You cannot pull every single child out of public schools and put them in parochial and private schools. There simply aren't enough spaces. I went to a conference recently where there were a lot of charter school founders, and they all say that they're running extremely long wait lists. So in the meantime, before we can build all the new schools and put in all the new curriculums and train all the teachers not to be woke, indoctrinators, I think in the meantime, we really need to focus on our public schools. Most children go to their local public school across the country, and we can't just abandon these schools and say, oh, these are government schools, pull your kids out, and that's it, we're done. I think changing the culture means that we have to focus on what's happening in these public schools, and we need to fight for them. We can't just abandon and surrender and give up on these schools.
So, Bethany, final question. I'll let you go because I hear the baby. What does public school look like in 20 years, do you think? Could you guess?
I mean, it really depends on sort of which road we take. And a lot of this conversation about indoctrination in schools ignores the fact that, and this is a famous Karol Markowiz line, for every minute that you spend on and I always butcher it and it bothers her so much, for every minute you spend on woke indoctrination, you don't spend those minutes on math and reading. And I mean, this is where we're at. And if you look at the test scores, kids are really not, they're not being well served by our public school system. And so I think that the revolution will honestly come by parents who say, like, I send my kids to you to get an education. You're barely providing babysitting service at this point. And I think that after 2 years of COVID, parents have really had it. They've said, like, we've seen what's under the hood, and we need something better, and my kids deserve something better.
I think this is one of the single most important books you'll read this year. It's called Stolen Youth. Well, it's really one of the most important books for the future of the country. Stolen Youth, How Radicals Are Erasing Innocence and Indoctrinating a Generation. Bethany Mandel, Karol Markowiz, co-authors. Ladies, thank you for your work, both of you. I appreciate it.
MyPillow 2.0. I don't know if you are familiar with the product yet. I don't know if you've seen Mike Lindell talking about MyPillow 2.0, but I'm sleeping on it right now, and I can tell you this is amazing. He's developed a pillow that actually keeps you cool at night. Sincerely. I didn't even know that was possible. If you're somebody that runs a little warm at night, Mike has actually created a MyPillow 2.0, which is that adjustable fill that he's talked about for the last 20 years, but now a new fabric that helps regulate your body temperature through the night, which creates a lower surface temperature, and that gets you a better restful night's sleep. Now, here's the thing. If you go to MyPillow.com and you order the new MyPillow 2.0 today, you'll get another one for free just by using my name, Chris. So go to MyPillow.com, click on the radio listeners square, and enter my name, Chris, and you will get a second MyPillow 2.0 for free. My name also gets you up to 66% on everything on that website, 66% off. Robes, slippers, sheets, dog beds, my coffee. Mike has an unbelievable spate of merchandise at MyPillow.com, more than I had any idea. So if you haven't shopped MyPillow yet, I hope you'll go. I hope you'll use my name, Chris, and save big-time money on great products, which are all American made. They are warranted for 10 years. There's a 60-day money-back guarantee. All you have to do is pick up the phone and call 800-932-5056, 800-932-5056, or MyPillow.com.
You've been hearing the advertisements, at least I hope, if you've been a regular listener to the station. Irreligious Nation. Have you heard the ads? We've been running them. SalemNow.com is where you can watch it. Sam Sorbo and her husband, Kevin, are the producers behind this film. It sounds incredible. It sounds intense. I can't wait to dive in. I haven't watched it yet. Sam joins me now. Sam Sorbo, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here with you with that gorgeous golden voice that you have, Chris.
Well, thank you so much. I
wish my voice sounded so good in the morning.
Well, listen, it's after a lot of coffee, frankly. It's not organic, I'll promise you. Listen, I am a big fan. You and I have talked well before now about other projects that you've been involved with. One of the things that you care deeply about, I know, is the nation's children, obviously your own, but the nation's children, and bringing them up right. I was really excited about this project. This goes a little beyond, obviously, just school, but I think it's all part of a bigger picture, right?
It is, absolutely. And it sadly, school goes beyond school, you see, and so we really have to take that into account. So, we're losing our religion. Yes. We're actually losing our religion generation upon generation, and I would trace the cause of that directly to our school system. But what we're dealing with now are the results, and we're not understanding why we're seeing the craziness in the culture today. Pennsylvania just said, "Hey, parents, butt out. You're not allowed to participate in the conversations of gender transforming your child. You are not relevant." And that is basically calling parents irrelevant to their children, full stop. And I would guard against that. And I would tell parents, please do not submit your children into a system of indoctrination that seeks to exclude you from the conversation. That is something that is so dangerous because, as we know, children will believe anything you tell them. And so we have to be very careful about who's allowed access to our children. I tell parents, don't give the electronics to your children because you're not giving them access to the internet. You're giving the internet access to them. And we see in the culture today that the they thems want to have sex with your children. So be aware and do not expose your children to that influence. And unfortunately, that influence has taken over our schools today.
You may Sam, you may disagree with this. And this may be unimportant, and maybe I'm spending too much time thinking about something that's not particularly relevant. But the drag queen thing in particular, Sam, I used to I would chuckle at it. I never thought much about it. The Birdcage is one of my favorite comedies ever. I always thought it was hilarious comedy. Nathan Lane, Robin Williams. It poked gentle fun. It's sort of a gay culture who dressed up as women, and then a conservative guy, and it was a sort of a Romeo-Juliet story. It was sort of mindless and silly, and okay, gay guys dress up as women, whatever. There's something different about it now. Maybe it was always serious, and I didn't take it seriously enough, but there's something even about it now that seems co-opted or corrupted and more aggressive than before, but it's not quite the same as trans, right? And I'm trying to figure out what's going on there. No. What do you see?
Well, it's changed. You see, it used to be poking fun at that. And some people had strange proclivities. They were odd, but they were harmless. Yeah. And let adults be adults. But then it shifted. And now it's grown men who want access to children. Mm-hmm. And because they slap on some lipstick and some false eyelashes, somehow that makes it okay that these grown men want access to your children. Mm-hmm.
So it's the child aspect you think has changed?
Absolutely, the child aspect, because we are a live and let live society.
Yes.
And that, frankly, that goes back to our Christian roots. We don't put stumbling blocks in front of other people. If some people want to eat fish on Friday and other people want to eat meat, don't call them out for that. But at the same time, let's protect our children. And now we've been so worn down with the attack, I would say, the attack on Christian values, that we are now called to not protect our children. How dare you protect your children? You're being bigoted by protecting your children from men who want to dress up as women and have your child sit in their lap.
And in all sincerity, Sam Sorbo, this movie, Irreligious Nation, I hope people go watch it at salemnow.com. What I've also not understood, and you as a woman can speak to this, is how this culture of men becoming women or acting as women, part-time or full-time, supplanting women in competition, in jobs, culturally, it seems dangerous to women.
Yes, it is. But that was the feminist movement. So third wave feminism basically gave up all of femininity's powers. And now they're trying to, because they've wrested the masculine powers, the men are saying, okay, well, we want our power back, so we're going to become women. And they turn the tables on us, right? And it is a very dangerous thing because, the old adage goes that strong men create good times and good times create weak men, and weak men create bad times. And we are entering into some very bad times because we have some very, very weak men. We had a president who, the day after a tragic shooting by a transgender, declared it somehow Transgender Awareness Day or something, Support Day. And I'm like, that was how unfeeling must you be to perpetrate that on the American public? And yet we are so uninformed, uneducated, miseducated that half the country seemingly is willing to accept that and applaud it. These are very dangerous times.
How about the demented, Sam? How about the demented discussions of disrespecting the assassin, this Audrey Hale? There are people that are literally talking about how awful it is that we're dead naming her and not respecting that she wanted to be addressed as a man when talking about her corpse. I mean, it's insane.
Listen, if dead naming is actually a thing, there ought to be a lot more funerals. I'm just saying, like, what is that? I'm not seeing anybody dying, so how can we dead name?
It's so stupid.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The thing is that that community, that theology, has co-opted Christian theology, right?
Yes.
Because we used to say, I am dead to myself and now I'm alive in Christ. I am reborn, right? So they have their own rebirth.
Yes.
They have their own being dead to themselves, but reborn as a new creature. And this is a clash of ideology. It's a clash of worldview. It's a clash of religion. But they're saying, well, we don't have religion. Oh, yes, you do.
Mm-hmm.
You worship the self. You worship yourself as God. And that's a very dangerous thing, because if you have your own truth, that means that you're not willing to allow other people their truth. And it's so much better when we all agree that there is one truth, isn't it? Isn't life better that way?
Sam, I don't know if you caught Tucker's monologue last week. I thought it was one of the most brilliant things I'd ever heard said, and it was one of those I wished I'd thought of. And I know Irreligious Nation is exactly on this point. And he said that what you're saying, transgenderism is diametrically opposed to Christianity. They cannot peaceably coexist for the very reasons you just laid out. It is its own orthodoxy. It is its own religion. They cannot coexist. And I just thought, of course that's it. It is its own religion.
Right. And in fact, he probably watched my documentary.
Probably so. I hope people
What's fascinating is Christianity does not seek to shut down other theologies.
No.
The only thing that it does is it seeks the truth. The truth takes care of itself. The truth is the truth. The lie is the thing that cannot tolerate the truth. And so the lie has to go after the truth and seek to shut it down. That's why you don't see Christians warring against, the other theologies, because we understand truth, and the truth is the truth.
Yes.
You're the ones arguing with gravity. You're the ones arguing with gravity, then jumping out of the 27th story of a building and saying, "Ha, I win," until you go splat.
Irreligious Nation is the name of the film. It's at salemnow.com. In this film, you and your family, you travel to Israel, something I've never done. I'd like to do. Our colleagues Dennis Prager and Mike Gallagher are taking listeners this fall on a Stand With Israel tour. I've never made this trip. What should we know about having done so, particularly on Holy Week? What did it mean to you?
Yeah, no, that's really why we made this documentary, is to give people a little bit closer access. People who have never been to Israel, you get a real taste of it. You get a real glimpse of it through the film, because we take a tour of 60 people who are, by and large, looking to rekindle their faith, let's say, looking to augment their faith. Many of them are strong believers. Many of them are not. And so we have a big mix of people who are just trying to connect, right? Religio is a form of reconnection. That's what the Latin words mean that give us the word religion. And so this is what people are doing on this journey. And we call it walking in the footsteps of Jesus. So it's a historical trip. We're going back in time, in a sense, and sort of experiencing some of the places that Jesus walked and reconnecting with our history as humans, right? And as Christians. And so in the film, we're trying to expose people to that. But then there was this overarching question of what's it all about, Alfie? Is it really meaningful? Do we really need religion? Why do we have faith? What good is it? We have a school system that denigrates faith, that leaves faith on the outside and purports to handle all education. Of course, that's absurd. Any self-respecting Christian wouldn't submit his children to the school system because they ignore the Bible.
Yeah.
And if you believe the Bible, but of course, we as a country, we don't believe the Bible anymore because we all went to school. And so we had 13 years of indoctrination against the Bible. We had 13 years of indoctrination that taught us that all knowledge was held outside the Bible, and the Bible didn't have anything to say about knowledge or wisdom because of its omission in the schools.
Yes.
And so we asked this question in the documentary, why is faith even necessary? And I think we come up with some very interesting answers that I hope people will get some good information from. I think it'll make people start to take their Bibles maybe just a little bit more seriously, or maybe it'll get them to visit a church and go inside.
Yes.
Try to rekindle that for people.
It's so interesting you say, I went through public school. I never interpreted, I don't have memories of feeling as though it was hostile. It was just exclusive. It was in absence of, right? So that's enough.
That is hostility.
It is hostility.
That is hostility
in its own way.
You see, we don't feel it.
Yeah.
You don't feel it because it's omitted.
Omission.
So they don't have to be hostile.
Yeah, omission.
They say we are the authority.
Yeah.
We will teach you everything that you need to know. We are educated and we are the educators, and we ignore the Bible.
Yes.
That's all you need.
And I would just add,
it's the greatest ruse in the history of the world.
And
this is the greatest theft in the history of the world because they stole the family from us.
And we have to be mindful as well, I hate to say, and I'm coming to realize myself after years in a particular church, not to pile on, but I'll just say that, I spent a lot of years kind of, I won't say omission, that's not entirely fair, but I will say in the current church I find myself, I am learning how much I didn't know and how little scripture and the actual word of God was being preached throughout much of my Christian life and walk. And I'm not saying it was non-existent. I'm just saying even in your church, never mind school, even in your church, you got to have your head on a swivel about what you're hearing from the pulpit these days.
Oh, well, I mean, I don't know how much time you have, but there should not be kids' church. We shouldn't be sending our children to a different church than we adults go to. Yeah, okay, something may be up until the age of 3 or 4, but then children can learn to sit in the pews and hear from the preacher. And they want to, because children want to be adults. We ought to be raising adults and not children. But our schools have convinced us of the infantilization, of the benefits of infantilizing children until they're age 26, wearing pajamas, and they're still on their parents' health care plan. And that is not a recipe for a strong society. That's a recipe for a weak society, and a society that's easily overrun by totalitarian ideas. And so as Christians, we ought to take note. And I will say, unfortunately, we have a lack of leadership in the Christian community.
Yes.
Because we all went to public school and we learned in government schools how to follow. We didn't learn how to lead. They do not teach leadership in the schools. If you want to create leaders, keep them out of the institutions, because it is not by being institutionalized that children will learn to stand out and lead. They will learn to bully. That's different. They will not learn to lead properly.
The film is called Irreligious Nation. It's available right now at salemnow.com. This would be a great week. This would be a great weekend.
Yes.
Maybe Good Friday, Good Saturday, perhaps. Even on Easter Sunday, this would be a great film to watch with your family. Irreligious Nation,
And
Sam Sorbo.
it's not terribly long either.
No?
So it's an easy thing to just watch in an afternoon and enjoy, and then have a discussion about with your family and your friends, and visit really what do we mean by Easter? Passover also. What do we mean by this?
I can imagine this being a great Bible study, maybe in church, right? People watch this in a class, perhaps a Bible study.
It's look, I'm all for Bible studies. I'm all for studying your Bible if only we crack the Bible more often. And I train parents to home educate their kids, and one thing I say, because parents say, well, I can't teach the Bible, I can't possibly. And I tell them, there's a really good book that will show you how to teach the Bible. It's actually a bestseller. It's been a bestseller for centuries. It's called the Bible. It will teach you how to teach the Bible. All you have to do is open it and read it with your kids.
Yes.
They can learn to read. They will learn history. They will learn science. They will learn math from the Bible. There's a whole book in the Bible called Numbers. Has so much information in it.
So
and we leave it out of our schools.
Every time, Sam Sorbo, every time I cross paths with you and speak with you, I come away so inspired. Your passion is infectious. People hear it, and I get comments every time you're on the show.
Thank you.
I love your love for your faith, your family, and people. Yeah, the future of the country, the world, really. Irreligious Nation.
I will say that. I just one last thing I have to say. Coming away from Israel, I love people more. I didn't think it was possible.
I love
that.
It
changed me as a person. I hope that people can get something of that from the film.
I can't wait to watch Irreligious Nation, salemnow.com. Go watch it. Sam Sorbo, a real pleasure. Thank you. If you're a regular Fox News viewer, particularly in the prime time, if you watch shows like Tucker's and Laura's, you've seen him. I've been so intrigued with his work. Particularly his most recent, Will You Go to Hell for Me? Will You Go to Hellforme.com, out on DVD. You can watch it at Rumble right now. The gentleman behind it is Vince Evert Ellison, and he joins us this morning. Mr. Ellison, so good to have you on the show finally. Welcome.
Oh, man, I'm so happy to be with you. Thanks for having me.
You bet. First of all, the film, from what I'm told, and I haven't seen it quite yet, but I'm told it's been going gangbusters. Very well received, yes?
Oh, yes. If your viewers are so inclined, they can go to willyougotohellforme.com, and they can look at the trailer, and they can stream or buy the DVD or rent it from there. And you also go to Rumble, like you said. They can see it also on YouTube. Tucker has says the best trailer he ever saw.
It is.
Many people, and many people said that it's the best film they've ever seen. Everybody says it is the best documentary because it covers so much stuff that has been untouchable in America for the past 50, 60 years, like Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Movement, and how they've led, and how the Civil Rights Movement helped these Marxists take over the Democrat Party. And the Democrat Party has now turned America into this chaotic country. It covers things that everybody else has been afraid to cover, and it hits it very, very hard.
Jason Whitlock, a colleague of mine, years ago worked with him in radio. He's with The Blaze now. I don't know if you're familiar with his work, but one of the things he says...
Yes, I'm very familiar with Jason. He's a great guy.
Okay. As a person of color, Jason can speak to this with more authority, certainly, than I can. And something he says often, and I'll run this by you also as a man of color, his belief is that the trans movement in particular is trying to co-opt the racial movement in this country. What's your assessment of that? You agree?
Yeah, the trans movement has. I mean, and will you go to hell for me? That's the big question. Why don't Christians vote their values? They tried to get my daughter to go to this. We stopped at a McDonald's, and after Trump was elected, and these people had this march. These women going up to D.C. and they want to run Trump out the White House, and they're a bunch of feminists, a bunch of pro-abortion people, and they tried to get my daughter to join them. And my daughter said to them politely, said, "Ma'am, I'm not a liberal. I'm a Christian. I vote my values. I vote for Trump." And I asked the question, why don't most Christians just say that? Because the Democratic Party, and I start my movie out with this definitive statement. The Democratic Party is the evilest institution in the history of the world, period. Now, some people want to bring up the Nazis and this, that, and the other, but I have in my last book, it hit number 20 in the world and was number 1 in America. times it's been the last year, 25 lies. That's been my in the first chapter. I talk about the evil, and I talk about how this professor from Yale, his name is James, a guy from the University of Southern California. His name is Wolf Gunner. He wrote books about how the Nazis came over here in the 1920s, and they consulted the Democrat Party. And they wanted to find out how did they take black people and make them second-class citizens and were able to murder them at will because they do it to the Jews in Germany. And the Democrats were the ones that told the Nazis how to do it, told them how to write the Nuremberg laws. Yeah, that's a true story. I have it documented in 25 lies. So the Democratic Party was Nazis 100 years ago. The Nazis were Nazis and were Nazis 25 years after the Nazis left. This is who they are. So this transgender movement is just a variation on the theme. There's never been a time in American history where the Democratic Party has not tried to debase this country. From 1800 to 1860, it was a part of slavery. From 1860 to 1865, a part of the Confederacy. From 1865 to 1970, a part of Jim Crow. Now it's abortion, Marxism, transgenderism, child mutilation, and murder, because it even wants to abort children up to the 9th month. The Democratic Party is a party that's controlled by a cabal of perverts, liars, psychopaths, and anti-Christian bigots. And it cannot support itself without the Christian community. Black Christians more than anybody else. Will you go to hell for me? Defends Christianity. It defends conservatism. It tells everybody that conservatives are not the problem in America. It's these rich liberals and the black preacher, the black politician, and the black civic organizer. They are the ones that are causing all the chaos. And every Christian has to turn away from this party, because to vote for this party in its present form is putting your soul in jeopardy of going to hell, period.
Vince Everett Ellison, will you go to hellforme.com, the website, 25 Lies, his book. The black church in particular, Mr. Ellison, when you talk about black Christians, I've often thought similarly about many people who immigrate from the South. Hispanic families also, I've always thought when it comes to cultural issues, the Christian family, be they black, white, or Hispanic, all share very similar points of view and biblical points of view and value the family. I've always thought, is that naive at our core? That's where we're similar?
Yeah, you're very correct. And this is where the Democratic Party is masterful. Their primary goal is to, and I talk about this in the movie, their goal is to divide the Christian community, the children of Christ. Jesus' last prayer before he went to the cross was for us to be united. He prayed for unity amongst his people and his children. And the Democrats will come in and they'll take the smallest difference, and make us fight one another. We agree with 99% of everything. I walk between these two worlds, this black Christian world and the white Christian world, and I have no problem whatsoever talking with people. I have no problem whatsoever combining with people. And I find out that they agree with 99% of everything. But that one thing, it makes us fight one another. Yeah. And they are masters at it. They'll make us fight over Confederate flags, monuments, statues. They'll make us fight against the army of the dead. And while they take over the public education system, while they are grooming our children for their sexual gratification, while they are killing our children in abortion clinics and selling their body parts for profit. This is who they are. And we have to understand this so that when we see them coming, we can defend ourselves against them.
How do you read what seems to be, I know it's not brand new literally, but it feels like in the last couple of years, it's like a fire hydrant was uncorked on this trans thing. How do you read it? Where did it come from? Again, I know it's not literally new, but in terms of it just culturally being just blasted in our faces to the point that, you know, they're marketing it in beer now. It's like, I don't know where it came from. It feels almost overnight, I think, to most sane people.
Well, when Joe Biden won the presidency, and a lot of these trans people were involved in his campaign and gave him a lot of money, when they saw that he won, they beat by 7 million votes. They thought they had a mandate.
Yep.
They thought that, all right, we finally proven that we are great people and that we should be accepted here in America. And Joe Biden gave them positions of authority and power in his administration. And now these trans people, just like the feminists and just like the people involved in CRT, want to use the federal government to press their agenda forward, not just here in America, all over the world. And it's getting pushed back. It got pushed back from Vladimir Putin. This is why him and Zelensky got into it. It's getting pushed back in China. It's getting pushed back in Africa because the Muslims don't agree with this. And China and Russia are taking advantage of this by telling people you no longer want these Western values because this is what they are. And the rest of the world, besides the United States of America and the EU, are appalled at this. The African nations don't understand it.
Yes.
The Muslim nations don't understand it. As you saw, China brokered a deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Why? Because they don't want to have nothing to do with the United States of America with this foolishness. So these trans people helped Joe Biden get elected. Joe Biden is paying off a debt to these people. As you see, and I have this in my book also, Joe Biden has said that even if an 8-year-old child wants to have a operation to change their gender, no one should try to stop it. This is state-sanctioned insanity. And Joe Biden's administration is pressing it. So he brought in this Levine woman and this guy, this cross-dresser, put him in the Health and Human Affairs, and took this Sam Brinkman guy that was wearing all these women's clothes and the bald head with the lipstick and the high heels, put him in his administration, took Buttigieg, and, who's married to a guy and who breastfeeds children with some type of weird thing on his chest, put him over the transportation department. He's paying off a debt to a bunch of people that need prayer and need our help. They're exploiting them, and it's a shame.
And when you hear, this is something I was just talking about yesterday, Mr. Ellison, Evert Ellison with us again, 25 Lies is his book. Will You Go to Hell for Me is the film. Will You Go to hellforme.com. You can watch on Rumble or get the DVD. When you hear some Republicans say, this is social issue stuff and we shouldn't get distracted because it's divisive and it drives independence away, you say what?
I tell them they're crazy. This is the low-hanging fruit that we can all win by. Only 10% of Americans support abortion to the 9th month. I saw a great poll by Rasmussen that said that only about 20% of Americans support this drag queen transgender stuff. This is the stuff that people go to war over. People go to war to protect a way of life. The social issues are what always drives politics. But a lot of the Republicans don't want to have anything to do with it because they're also on the side of the Democrats with this stuff. This is why I don't call myself a Republican anymore. I'm a Christian conservative.
Amen.
47 Republicans voted with the Democrats when it came to this last gay marriage bill. Mm-hmm. They voted for it because many of them, a lot of these Northern Republicans specifically, adhere to all of this stuff. But they know that the Christian conservatives still have a lot of power in this party, and they try to act like they're on our side. No, they are rhinos, they are Manchurian candidates, and we have to press and make sure that this stuff is in the forefront. Glenn Youngkin won in the state of Virginia behind this. DeSantis won in Florida behind this. And these other candidates lost because Kevin McCarthy decided that he didn't want to go down that road. They're calling us fascists. They're calling us racist. They're calling us people that full of hate, and we want to talk about the debt ceiling. Isn't that ridiculous? They call us everything but a child of God every day. Are those two black guys that got kicked out of the state legislature in the state of Tennessee, right?
Yes.
Call us everything. Racist, hate mongers. And we want to talk about the debt ceiling. That's all they talked about. But they won't say they want abortion up to the 9th month. They want to kill children and want to make you murderers. They won't say that they let these drag queens in these schools shake their behinds in the face of children. They won't say that they want to castrate boys and girls, cut the breasts off little girls and call them little boys. Y'all, they don't want to tell you that. They don't want to tell you they want to lock children in public schools that they know are not educating them, paying the system over $20,000 a year to not educate a child. Not just to not educate, but to make a monster out of it. That's the Democrat Party. And that's why I made this film, because I'm telling people in this film, and will you go to hell for me? I'm telling them, this is not a political problem. Politics will not solve it. This is going to be us, the Christian community, doing again what Jesus told us we had to do. What did he say? He said, take this gospel and spread it all over the world, but starting in Jerusalem and then Samaria. So we have to go back and start at home. We have to start taking the lessons of Christ and the message of the gospel to the people of America again. Yes. And not concede any more ground to these people. I'm tired of them.
And I think, not that this is the pinpoint moment in history, but the first time that it really slapped me hard in the face, Vince, was years ago when the Democrats literally removed God from their party platform. And you might remember that scene when they hurriedly tried to reinsert God into the party platform, and the party erupted on the floor of the convention in boos when they kind of forcibly put it back in because they knew it was politically toxic. The core of that Democrat Party wants to literally be godless. Literally.
It is godless, and will you go to hell for me tells the Christian community that they are lending their support to an atheist, godless party. You should see some of the mail I get from these daggum Democrats who just hate me because I'm a Christian, hate Christianity. They will tell me, yes, we have these foolish Christians voting for us because Christians are fools, and they're putting us in power. They're putting atheists in power to use the power of the federal government to groom your children. Yeah, they tell us that. Yeah, we're going to groom them. We're going to take over. They're going to be working for us. We're going to be using your children for our sexual gratification. See, this is a plan. This isn't done by accident. These people are very, very shrewd. They might be evil, but they're not stupid. You know, the plan that these pedophiles have is very simple. First, they're going to stock these libraries with these pedophile books and grooming books. They're going to promote Drag Queen Story Hour. They're going to promote gender fluidity. They're going to introduce porn literacy into the schools. They're going to introduce queer curriculum and expose children to LGBTQ ideology. They're going to introduce irreversible sex change operations to children. They're going to promote mixed bathrooms in schools. They're going to introduce soft sentences for pedophiles. They're going to push to lower the age of sexual consent. And they're going to dismiss and demonize, and talk down concerned parents. They're going to call them racist, they're going to call them intolerant, and they're going to try to shut them down. That's their goal. Since we know that this is what they're doing, we need to be armed. That's why I did We Go to Hell for Me. That these people aren't playing any longer. They are for real. And if we don't fight them now, it's going to be over for us. They're coming.
He's Vince Evert Ellison. His brilliant book, 25 Lies, his brilliant new film, powerful new film, Will You Go to Hell for Me, at willyougotohellforme.com, on Rumble, on DVD. And we need dozens and dozens like you in every state of the union. Hundreds, thousands, really. But look, one of you is good, and we'll start with one. Thank you for your time today. I hope you'll come back, Vince.
Well, look, the people always ask me, Vince, how can we help? How can we help? This is how you can help. Buy this DVD. Stream it. I promise you, every dime I make goes back into making more and putting PR behind it and putting the word out. It is too important for Christians to understand that they are the ones that are supporting this evil institution, and that if they stop, the Democrats will have to either go bankrupt or change. But they are choosing to go to hell for these people. They're not worth it. Don't go to hell for them. Don't let them send your soul to hell.
The Chris Stigall Show Podcast.